Thank you, audience, for being an audience and being a loyal audience. And tonight I'm going to share with you mind mapping multi-generational family members using my system of healing. And why am I doing this show? Because I'm always inspired by what I do in the treatment room. And there is something really, really remarkably special about having a family sit together, particularly a disconnected family, and healing that multi-generational rift using the mind map and having everyone present. Can you imagine? And I know a lot of you are disconnected from your mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, children. But imagine having everybody in the treatment room come together for the purpose and intention to heal the multi-generational disconnects and how to use the mind map doing that. And hopefully, I'll have people call in who truly, truly are motivated to heal their family and can give the opportunity to me to do such a beautiful piece of work. It usually takes a lot of preparation for the family members and then a couple of hours sitting with me so that we can all get to know each other and get to know each other's blueprints and then put together why it is that there is such a severe family disconnect. So, yes, this is what I love to do. And it is just so rewarding when you have a situation where one member of the family, let's say the daughter or the son, comes in and has been harboring so much resentment and um, so much trigger based on the childhood wounds that they've incurred and now are being activated by not only their mothers and fathers, but also now having lived life and repeated the patterns unto significant others and bosses and friendships and so on. Imagine sitting with your blueprints, mom and dad, and having them take ownership of all the multi generational wounds that they incurred and how it affected them and how they are now realizing has infected the next generation. So let's get that mind map up there and do some mind mapping so I could explain to you how this all works and why this is so very powerful when you get a whole family in there. So we're looking at, let's look at panels 1, 2, and 3 in particular. So let's say I have a mother and a father and a son in here, and the son has been harboring resentment toward parents who have definitely disconnected on some level, whether they've been physically abused. Now I'm looking at panel 1, the wounds, whether they've been physically abused or verbally abused or sexually abused or emotionally neglected or controlled and smothered or simply not connected with at all because the parents have been too apathetic and selfish to connect. So if you look at panel 1, the dark spots are the shadows. The light is the light of the person present in the room. And usually that light is clouded over with multi-generational wounds. And so what we do in family therapy, at least what I do in family therapy, is I mind map the mother and the father, the patient, usually the person bringing in their parents has already done the mind map work. And so now I'm asking the parents to share with me and their son or daughter, or whoever happens to be in the room, what they went through in their childhood. What happened to them? Who done it? What extent was did they feel the damage? And how that infected and affected their marriage and their parenting and setting up the relationship with their children, the siblings, whether one became a golden child or a scapegoat or who knows what family dynamics people were positioned in. So part of this really could be seen as understand what happened individually to you, the parents, see how you processed it or didn't, see how you reacted to it, and then see how your own encodings kept you from being the parent that you could have, should have, would have been had you not been infected multi-generationally. And so part of what I want to talk about tonight are the different layers that shadow over our past. Layers like cultural wounds, layers like economic strife, layers like wars and disconnects from family members who've had to leave their country. So there's so many levels of disconnects that once it lands onto the parents, they soak it up and then they manifest it again into their marriage, into the relationship with their children, and then create psychopathology in their own children. So, why am I doing this topic? Because it works. Because there's nothing more powerful for the child of to sit in the room with their very own parents and with my guidance without being blamed, without being shamed, without being criticized. Straight up look at the system gone wrong and what went awry with the parents that then ended up in a severe disconnect between parents and child, whether it be a child or an adult child. It doesn't matter. It's just that we're tracing the wounds all the way back. And while I'm doing this, of course, I also want to take inventory on how were the parents' parents? What kind of parents did they have? Cold mother, cold father, warm father, any alcohol in the family system, any divorces in the family system, how they interpreted the treatment that they got from their parents so that they can understand what wounded them and how they reacted, whether the reaction was shutting down or getting angry or whatever fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode they went into, and then see how it all landed in panel 3, which is the core belief panel. So if you look at panel 3, you'll see a DNA strand. There are children that are climbing up the ladder. I know my internet is unstable. Hopefully it'll hold through the show. Hopefully you guys are not affected by the instability of internet, but you can see how the bonds that the parents have developed between each other form the basis of the family bond, which is the basis upon which children develop and grow and climb up the psychosocial ladder to their own success or maybe their own demise. So if you look at all the little people on that strand, you'll see little people walking around. I know the figures are real tiny, but they're there. And you can also pull up the mind map by going to my website, 𝗧icologicalhealingcenter.com. And then you'll see all these little people climbing around, walking around, hanging around. But what is not happening is that they're not evolving. So when childhood wounds infect the system, it keeps the children, the offspring, from evolving and becoming the best of their best. So think of it as wounded family blueprint. And this wounded family blueprint, much like genetics, if you have a genetic misalignment, a genetically inherited disease, for example, then it passes down to the next generation. In this case, I'm talking more psychologically passed down. So let's call it psychogenetics. And the emphasis is on the word psycho, because if you don't have a good blueprint from mother or father or both, then you're being infected, and you're psychologically inheriting a horrible blueprint that will take you down. And if we look at panel number 4, 5, 6, you could see it'll take you down into chaos. And what's chaos? Chaos is where the bonds don't hold up. So this is the disconnect I'm talking about. And the disconnect throws people off balance. If you look at that panel, you'll see a lot of toxic haze in the background. This is a metaphor for the toxic family system, the toxic family environment. And you could see the bonds are broken, and you could see that everyone is just kind of flailing around and flying out into the ozone, and there's no real north, south, east, west. There's no structure. So when you don't have a good blueprint, you're going to destabilize the family. And usually one of those little flying objects, meaning the identified patient, usually the person who comes to therapy is the one that is now left with the chaos, doesn't know what to do, comes to therapy and says, you know, what's wrong with me? Why am I using alcohol now? Why am I isolating? Why am I overeating? Why am I OCD? Why am I whatever symptoms they bring? And then if you look at panel number 5, you could see that panel number 5, all of those orbs are a metaphor for defense mechanisms. So the eating, the drugs, the smoking, the sex, the cell phone usage, the checking out, the OCD, those are all defense mechanisms to help people cope with the wound and fill what I refer to as the hole in the soul. And for any one of you who have not yet read my book, Be the Cause Healing Human Disconnect, please do so. You can order it off of Amazon.com, or you can get a free PDF copy by ordering it from the Psychological Healing Center. And then, of course, you'll get all sorts of other goodies like the Peaceful Healing Dialogue, which is also in my book. But what I'm saying is really to deeply follow what I'm talking about, it takes a lot of reading and rereading and re-listening to everything that I'm saying, because I'm teaching you guys a system that hopefully will be the system gone right going forward, but we've got to see the system that went wrong so that people could start to understand how they landed up into chaos, why they're defending so hard, why they're hurting so much that they have to use these defenses, and why ultimately they are breaking down, either breaking down emotionally, spiritually, financially, physically, somatically, physically, breaking down in terms of divorces, relationships gone sour. So when we psycho-inherit bad blueprints, it infects us, we react, we encode all the horrible messages that are passed down to us, messages that I've spoken a lot about on several episodes, messages like, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, I'm stupid, I'm fat, I'm ugly. I can go on and on and on. And I'm sure that as listeners, you can identify with certain of these messages that you psycho-inherited and are now the trigger points that then get activated and take you down into chaos, defenses, and more breakdowns. And then this unfortunate cycle cycles through. And we don't get to panel 7, 8, 9 because we're in a loop. We're in a 𝗬𝗏𝗧 loop. And this 𝗬𝗏𝗧 loop traps us in there, maybe for life. And then we keep getting more and more upset. We keep repeating the same patterns. We keep inviting the same relationships into our our um, our lives. We keep holding resentment toward our parents. Our parents keep holding resentment toward us and their parents, and this goes on and on. So somebody's got to intervene. And I think the mind map is a really effective way to intervene. Are there any questions in the chat room?
No questions yet, just some comments about, people experiencing what you're talking about. So please, if you're in the chat room, please give us a call in at 323-524-2599 or leave us some questions in the chat room. I'm sure Dr. Judy would love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. And it's just so remarkable when you can get the parents in there. Imagine the parents in front of their child breaking it down and saying, yep, my mother called me names and I came to believe that I was stupid. And as a result of this belief system, I didn't feel that I had much to teach you. And then maybe the father will break it down in terms of his family and say, well, in my culture, we were taught not to talk and we were taught not to interact too much with the children and be busy working and leave the psychoeducation and family education to the mother. So now we open it up, and then the son or the daughter can now see what the Freud was going on, why mommy dearest was so quiet and dad was so absent, and why they punished by hitting, and these the multi-generational cultural styles that they adapted into the family and then onto the children, certain ways of discipline, certain ways of maybe explaining things that left the child feeling unlovable and unimportant and compromised in some way. So part of the beauty of doing this on a family level is so everybody can step out of the system and see what the Freud went down. And once they see what the Freud went down, they could see that this was never personal. This is just a bunch of unhealed family wounds that trickle down to the next generation. And then they can start giving their parents somewhat of a pass card, because look, you don't know what you don't know, and if you don't know better, then you can't do but better. But now that they know what happened, now they can begin to own their own stuff, which is the most beautiful thing a parent can do. So one of the ways that I'll get to the question in a minute. One of the ways that I work with people is I have them take a look at what their family did to infect them and how it affected their marriage and how it affected their children. And sure, what is the question in the chat room?
Well, actually, we have a couple, but this one is, I guess, directed to you as a therapist and as maybe. But they said, what experience does a therapist have to work in multi-generational family issues? Is there, or do all therapists have the ability to handle that situation?
Well, I'm sure a lot of you have been to therapy, and my pet peeve is regular therapy where you just sit there and nod your head and say, how does this make you feel? How does that make you feel? I'm not a fan of it because you're not learning anything. So,
Right.
what experience? You have to have, well, to me, a knowledge of the mind map, which right now I'm the only one teaching that. A few people know the mind map because I've taught them the mind map. But if you don't have a structure and a plan, or at least if you don't have a knowledge about systems thinking. People like 𝗬𝗏𝗏 was a systems thinker. I believe Virginia Satir was a systems thinker. There were some really prominent systems thinkers that I learned from through my education while I was going to school. And it made me realize that things are not just in isolation, that when you have a system, everybody's impacting everyone else, like an ecosystem. If you've got good soil and good sun and trees that are healthy, it's going to create the sufficient amount of oxygen and nutrients for other plants and animals to be in this beautiful, balanced ecosystem and thrive. Same things with us, that when we are healthy, our health begets health. And if we're not healthy, our unhealth begets more childhood wounds that again lead us into chaos defenses and breakdowns. So, in my opinion, I don't think there's anything more important than years and years of mastery. And I love my work so much. I've been doing this for, oh my God, close to 3 decades. And so I recognize patterns. I've been around the block a few times. I invented the mind map system so that we could put it together and talk intelligently about what happened, how this played out, how it trickled down, and then how to morph out of the mess. So I refer to the mind map as a from, through, to system. From the wounds of the past, through deconstructing and dismantling them, to paradigm shifting you into something new, something fresh, something more evolving. And it's impossible to evolve if you're just sitting there and isolating the problem into symptoms, because most therapies will concentrate way too much on the symptoms. Like, oh, let's deal with your anxiety. Let's deal with your impression. Oh, I see that you're OCD as well. Let's refer you to a psychiatrist for your OCD. Let's treat your ADD, ADHD as well. So what all of this is really is treating the symptom and not the cause, and not integrating the symptoms into a system that speaks to why they're present and in need of attention in the first place. So for me, treating this symptom is not sophisticated therapy. Sometimes you do need to treat symptoms. If somebody's having a panic attack, I think you need to treat the symptom right away and dial it down so that you can get to the cause behind that panic attack. If you've got somebody who is so agoraphobic that they won't leave the house, yeah, some behavior modification and some way of alleviating their anxiety through stress reducing methods is valid. I do see validity to that, but once you've addressed and dialed down some of the symptoms, now you really have to see what is the cause behind the symptoms, because the symptoms are really an organized pattern of reactions to wounds. That's all they are. If you look at panel number 2, that is the amygdala. It's the fight, flight, freeze, fawn. It is the childhood reaction to pain. Also the adult version too, because when we are shocked and when we are in distress, we will resort to our amygdala, which is the primitive brain. However, the defense mechanisms are not as primitive as the amygdala. They are organized. So if somebody's hurt, they'll have a plan to numb the pain through alcohol or overeat or sleep or use the cell phone all day to not face up to what it is that they are trying to avoid. So you can see that I hope I'm answering your question. Without a proper pattern recognition, without a proper system of addressing this, then you're just sort of nowhere, just all over the map, really, and not really on a course, a pathway to healing. Any other questions in the chat room?
Yeah, we do have a couple, but this one says, how would you get a narcissist to attend a family session? My narcissistic father would storm out of this meeting once he knew what was going on.
Exactly, because, and I'll tell you why they storm out, because narcissists have such a wall around them. They have been so hurt on some level. Either they've been completely spoiled and they have no idea that they're a part of a system gone wrong because they're above everybody, or they've been so neglected or smothered or used that they have developed a shell around them to protect themselves from human connection, which they have figured out is not a real nourishing connection. So, first of all, they don't believe in connection really, heart to heart, because their system is one of power and control and not love and intimacy. Second of all, they think that owning your own stuff means blaming and shaming them, which they avoid like poison. It's sort of like Dracula, if you, I guess, if you put garlic next to Dracula, they'll retreat back. But to them, any kind of own your own stuff, any kind of self responsibility, it just doesn't translate that way. It translates to, what are you blaming me? Now you're saying it's all my fault. It's not my fault, it's your fault. They have no skin to protect themselves against any kind of a mirror and a feedback. And why? Because they haven't been properly mirrored in their childhood. They haven't been properly attuned to. So if I'm fortunate enough to get a narcissist in the room with the parents, then I would have to explain very carefully to the parents that that person needs to vent their pain so that they don't implode with it or protect from it, and help the parents not take responsibility. And maybe if the parents could own their own stuff, because again, the narcissist doesn't want to have anything to do with self responsibility or checking themselves in a mirror and see if there's any contribution that they're making to the system gone wrong. As long as we could keep away from their part in the plan and their shame and guilt underneath it all, which is underneath all of the defense mechanisms, because the narcissistic defense can get really ugly. I think some of you are familiar with narcissistic rage. So if you press the rage button, then you can really rev up the defensiveness. And what will happen in that case is you will be demeaned, you'll be devalued, you'll be destroyed, the person will storm out of there will be no therapeutic progress. And so the only way I know to treat these narcissistic injuries is, number one, have the person come individually first so that they can know what happened to create the disconnect before we bring the family members in. And then in order to treat narcissism, you have to treat the injury that they incurred that led to the narcissistic wall, the narcissistic rage, and the lack of attunement. So basically, you've got to help the person develop empathy for themselves, because you've heard me say many times, narcissists lack empathy. True. Why do they lack empathy? Because their caregivers were not empathic to them in most cases, or they didn't feel connected to their caregivers. Maybe they were human doings and objectified by the family and controlled by the family or ignored by the family, or something so severe that, again, they did not think that relationships were nourishing at all. So what's plan B when you don't have love and connection and intimacy? Well, plan B is power and control. If I can't get my needs met through connection, then I'll just wield power and manipulate and control and get my way that way. So I hope that answers the question. It would be very, very difficult to have a full-blown narcissist here with their family. It would have to be navigated really, really carefully with hopefully work on an individual basis with the person that has these severe narcissistic qualities so that they can recognize where these wounds have come from and not blame themselves and start to have some empathy for how they got so disconnected in the first place. And let's not forget that people who are that severely narcissistic don't like to come to treatment. They usually come to appease their girlfriends, husbands, wives, bosses, children, lovers, whoever, who are complaining about them. And so their idea of therapy is kind of like, yeah, I'll go. My wife told me that I have to go, and so yeah, I'll just show up. But they're not really interested in personal discovery, because behind that facade of narcissism is a real feeling of emptiness, a real feeling of vulnerability, and the false self, which is the mask, which looks like they're so great, kind of like, remember the the the, the what was that story? Oh, Little Red Riding Hood and the pigs, and they were huffing and puffing and blowing the house down. Well, to them, therapy is blowing down the facade. Remember, the house of sticks were just blowing down the facade, and what's beyond the facade is nakedness, naked psyche, and embarrassment, shame. So that's why they don't like to come to treatment. And I'd love somebody to call in, because I would love to mind map your family. And better yet, I'd love you guys to come in, whether it be on Zoom or personally, because I just really think that if we could get the whole family in here and work with the entire family, with everybody motivated to heal and setting the intention that way, then some major therapeutic interventions can be uh, taken to a whole new level, a different level than just a person sitting there saying, my mother's narcissistic, my father verbally abused me. There's something about having the opportunity to interview your own parents and find out why they are the way they are, and developing a sense of insight into how their core beliefs affected their marriage and ultimately their relationship. Map your family and see why it is that you've become infected and you're in chaos and you're in defense mechanism and you're breaking down. So back to the original question, do you need experience in this? I would say you need a lot of experience with it. So if you're just thinking that you can go to a average therapist and have them track all this, I hardly doubt it. And, quite honestly, I couldn't do it either without the help of my mind map, because I refer to my mind map a lot. And it gives me the ability to show in a big picture way what happened. Remember, from, through, to. What happened during the wounds of childhood of mother, father, how they reacted, what kind of core beliefs they encoded in their psyche, how they've been triggered by their own life and the culture that they come from, and so on, and what they psychologically pass down to the next generation. And I know that I did a YouTube episode on sibling rivalry as parents being the cause, because again, when I say the word cause, I'm not saying the parents are to blame, although I still think that we're all responsible for healing so that we can be the best of the parents that we can be. However, if parents are unhealed, then oftentimes what they'll do is um, pit one child against another, create sibling rivalry, jealousies, favoritism, and then when brother, sister, or brother, sister, sister start hating each other, then they can blame the children for the mess. However, if the parents begin to understand that they needed to use their children as pawns to um, defend them or to G. That's why in my book I say several times, be the cause of better outcomes to your life. That means know how you've been at the effect of horrible outcomes to your life. Because if you could see what you did to get yourself into the hot mess, or see for yourself what you psycho inherited that created the blueprint for your hot mess, what a beautiful piece of knowledge that is to have. That is precious, especially when you use it to self correct through self reflecting, owning your own stuff, and then creating a brand new blueprint that's going to create better outcomes for your life. So I love doing this kind of work. It's invaluable. And when everyone can see where everything is flowing from, then it puts everything in a different perspective. And then people don't feel under under the bus. They don't feel like, oh, well, there's nothing I could do about it. And I'm just a failure and I'm just a mess and I'm incurable and there's nothing I could do. Or the other, oh, nothing's my fault. It's all you. And stop dragging me into the blame game because, again, the mind map is not about blaming or shaming or demeaning or devaluing. It's really about pulling out the truth and pulling out the system so that you can take your cracked lens of perception, which is metaphorically represented in panel number 2, because the cracked lens of perception is the cracked lens that you see yourself and the world through based on the injuries, and then paradigm shift the cracked lens into a healed lens, which is now panel 7. So the cracked lens becomes the healed lens. Everything just kind of congeals and comes together. And panel 7 generates light. And the light in panel 7 is, can refer to it as the truth, universal truth, synergy, interconnection, mind, body, soul, anything that brings together truth and elevates us. So the cracked lens is the distorted lens, and the truth lens lets us see clearly. So that's what we're doing in the family therapy sessions, is everybody can stop seeing themselves and seeing their children and seeing their spouses through the cracked lens and start seeing everything from a truth lens, which then brings to psychoeducation, because most people don't have great blueprints to work off of. They don't know how to be a mother or a father, or they don't know how to set parental boundaries, or they don't know the difference between authoritative parenting and authoritarian parenting and laissez-faire parenting. One is when you just let everything happen. That would be the laissez-faire, no boundaries, no rules. And the authoritative is just too strict and too controlling. And then the authoritarian is when you have rules and roles. I hope I said that right. Sometimes I get those terms mixed up. But the one where you have rules and roles, and you explain it to everybody, and you explain why the boundaries are the way they are and why these rules are in place. I notice when I work with people that there's such a psychoeducational deficit that I have to role model it to them. And so oftentimes I'll do that. So I'll say, well, this is what it sounds like. And then I'll enter into a peaceful healing dialogue, which, by the way, is on my website and is in the book. And it's a way of dialoguing to get to the truth without breaking the bond and without repressing yourself so that you end up imploding or getting so angry that you end up exploding. So I like to say, don't implode, don't explode, just unload and use dialogue to clarify and inform and connect and own your own stuff and repair things that have been disconnected. And the right conversation can do that. And once I get a family in the room and we recognize the whole multi-generational system gone wrong, we can then start to heal the disconnects through conversation so that the parents can own their own stuff and recognize how their parenting styles, their multi-generational treatment of their children didn't work out so well for them or the children. And then they can start repairing that. And when I say repair, I don't mean I'm sorry, because I'm sorry doesn't demonstrate growth. I step on your foot, sorry. Okay, fine. I step on your foot 3 times. Well, I don't think I'm learning at that point. So something's missing here. So apologies are like erasers. They're just sort of erasing everything without any knowledge and any growth. And so better than an apology is inventory upon self. Own your own stuff. Look in the mirror and self-reflect, and then take that opportunity to get feedback from others in terms of how you've affected them, hurt them, and then start a repair process. So again, apologies are not the basis of repair. The real repair is understanding the disconnects and then conversationally reconnecting them so that the other individual can feel heard, mirrored, understood, and they can know that you got it, that the light bulb somewhere in there went off in your head, and that you don't have to repeat the old because they could, recognize that that's not workable and that's a lower level of consciousness anyway. And so through this dialoguing and interconnecting and weaving, we finally get to panel number 789, which is, if you look at 789 again, we're reintegrating, we're creating a paradigm shift into synergy, we're back in touch with our light, and then we can generate a new blueprint based on growth and healing and a stronger bond and an evolutionary system that helps people climb up the ladder spiritually, physically, financially, educationally, every which way. And then bring balance to their life so that you could see in panel number 9, there's a sense of calm, a sense of balance. You could see the 3 little dolphins in the right corner there, bringing the wisdom to the planet, my metaphor of mind, body, soul. So the dolphins are the wisdom masters informing us of a higher consciousness based on interconnection, based on health, based on love and intimacy and not power and control. And so that's what we do. That's what I do in family therapy. And so if you need that kind of work, please connect with me. I would love to do this for you. And remember that if you are in traditional therapy and you don't feel that you're making therapeutic progress, then don't spend your money, okay? Find somebody that's really an expert in their field because you will save money by getting the right person on your team. And that's the case with anything, whether it be getting the right attorney on your team for your case, or the right accountant on your team, or the right medical professional or healer. We have to surround ourselves by the right team to evolve. And so we cannot afford really to spend any money on treading water, ineffectual therapy, ineffectual anything. Are there any more questions in the chat room? Any other comments? And anyone want to call in?
Nobody's called in yet, but I think you guys should take advantage of the opportunity to speak with Dr. Judy. But how do you assess the family's dynamics and identify key issues before creating their mind map?
In the session, we assess. We go through everybody's past so that individually, if I have family members in the room, I'll speak with each one to find out their blueprint. I want to understand their wounds of childhood, who done it, what happened, to what degree. I want to understand how they reacted. I want to understand how they interpreted their family messages, what their, in essence, their core beliefs are, their negative core beliefs in particular. So I want to mind map everyone in the room and in front of everyone so that we can then talk to, well, how do you think this affected your daughter or your son? Or how did this affect your marriage? Or do you still believe that the cultural the cultural style of parenting is going to work with your children? Let's talk about that. One of my ways of seeing things is that just because something is culturally correct, it doesn't mean that it's mentally healthy. And obviously, mental health comes first. And that's a delicate line to walk, because sometimes you've got the culture clash where, for example, in certain cultures, the daughter-in-law is living with the mother-in-law, or rather the mother-in-law is living with the daughter-in-law. That's real common in Indian culture. And then there comes a point where the son is putting the mother before the daughter-in-law, and it creates all kinds of animosity, especially if this is happening in America, right? Because we're supposed to put our own spouses first. So we've got to navigate this and update the files and help the mother-in-law to understand the way that that is being taught in America, the philosophy. So a lot of things have to be taken into consideration to update the files and make sure that people can adopt and adapt new ways of being and new ways of seeing, hopefully for the better good of everybody in the system. So if there are no further questions, any other questions, comments?
I mean, there's one other question that under what conditions would you consider going no contact the best option?
Well, there are a lot of conditions that require no contact. If you have been so demeaned and devalued and abused, and especially in cases where there's been sexual violations, extreme violations, sometimes you just can't, and it's legitimate to go no contact if your parents are so unapproachable and so unworkable with and cause you so much injury. You know, at the end of the day, you've got to put yourself first. And, you know, I would try to do something before taking that radical approach, but if it cannot be, if you just can't be in the room with them, if they are just so injured themselves that they are causing more injury to you, at some point you've got to save yourself and exit the system. So please do take advantage of my book, Be the Cause Healing Human Disconnect. I have a video that you can avail yourself of called that one, the video series, and then the Healing from Narcissistic Abuse video that I created. Both are available, and just contact me, or you could go on my website and learn more about it. And in the meantime, I am such a believer in family therapy when people are on board and they learn a little bit before they walk into the room, at least learn a little bit about the mind map, so that when you're in the room, you're just not reacting and arguing and breaking down and defending. So you really understand that you're here so that you could trace what happened and what you brought into the system and what you can then clean up and what you can then reconnect. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in, and I'll see you next week.